Hi, my name is Royletta Romaine. I am the owner of Healing by the Forkful. I'm a registered and licensed dietitian and certified LEAP therapist from Boston. LEAP stands for Lifestyle Eating and Performance. I help my patients reduce or stop inflammation, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, migraines with food, not medicine. You can find me on Instagram at Healing by the Forkful, or you can email me at healingbytheforkfulrd@gmail.com. My mini podcast is short and to the point. A few times a month, I will bring you a new person who has been helped or has helped someone with what I call a personalized anti inflammation blueprint. Please send me an email if you have any questions or would like to be on the podcast. My hope is to reach as many people as I can with my podcast and get that out there, get this out there. And so, with that, welcome to my podcast. Today we have Angela Moore with us. She is a fellow dietitian and a certified LEAP therapist, and I'm going to have her introduce herself and a little bit more about what she does.
Thank you for having me, Royletta. I'm excited to be here and share my experiences with the MRT LEAP program. So, yeah, I have a master's degree in nutrition, and I am a certified LEAP therapist. I've been in private practice since 1990. First in North Carolina where I lived until 2001, and then I moved to Colorado, and I started like 4 different practices in different cities and towns. So I've been around. I started working with LEAP in 2007 because I was kind of tired of working mostly with weight loss. I just felt like I wasn't really making a difference in people's lives because losing weight can be very challenging and it is difficult, just kind of keeping your weight off. So I just found like I needed something else to help people. And so I became very intrigued with LEAP. In particular, the digestive health component of it, which led me kind of into functional medicine, where I've now expanded my practice into. So I do a lot of MRT LEAP, but I also offer some other functional medicine services.
Awesome. This isn't on the sheet, but do you have dietitians working with you, or you're just kind of doing all of this on your own?
I'm in private practice by myself. I have worked with other dietitians in the past. But yes, I'm a sole proprietor of my business.
Awesome. So tell us what LEAP is. Explain it to us, because we know that it's the gold standard for determining food sensitivities. But can you explain it to us in layman's terms, please?
Yeah. So the acronym MRT stands for Mediator Release Testing, and of course, you mentioned it. LEAP is Lifestyle Eating and Performance. MRT is a patented test that can help identify sensitivity reactions to foods and food-based chemicals. There are triggering mechanisms in the foods and chemicals in particular that occur to an individual that causes a cellular activation. And this cellular activation in turn causes the release of mediators. Just examples, I don't want to get too into chemistry, but like cytokines, leukotrienes are also a mediator, histamines, amines, and prostaglandins are just some examples of these. These mediators are what cause the inflammatory responses or effects in our body. Tissue damage is an example, edema, and one in particular, gut permeability. A lot of people talk about leaky gut. So that's one other inflammatory effect. And why I think MRT is considered the gold standard is because of how the test is performed and what you learn from that testing process.
Awesome. So now that we know that is the gold standard, what do you think about tests that are just popping up online? You can buy them. I've seen them in the supermarkets, and I'm like, whoa, that's definitely not as good as what we have to offer. So tell me what you would tell a patient who was thinking about whether to do LEAP or whether to do something that they saw popping up on the market.
So that's a good question, because there are several other tests on the market besides MRT. In fact, I thought it was so important for people to be able to compare MRT to these other tests that on my website, I have MRT comparisons to these common tests. The other tests in the market, unfortunately, well, I mean, not fortunately for us, but unfortunate for the people that buy them, only look at IgG antibodies. And we expect these antibodies actually to be elevated to the foods that we eat all the time or regularly. It's a normal physiological response. So
a lot of people think that they're all bad, and they're actually not. We need those responses, right?
Right. They're just common physiological responses. So if you eat these, foods regularly and you do this test and you're basically only showing one immune pathway or one response, it's going to come back positive. So you're not getting very much information. It doesn't mean that some of the foods that you eat with an IgG response might be a problem, but you're missing out on all the other types of responses that occur, like I mentioned earlier, these mediators. So MRT shows foods, and the other unique thing is food-based chemicals. These other tests typically don't show chemical type, food-based chemical responses. So basically, these mediators are dumped into the plasma from the white blood cells or the lymphocytes. And I like that term dumped because that's what happens when there's this big response. And those circulating mediators that I mentioned earlier, they're what cause these symptoms that people have. The stiff joints, the gas, the bloating, these GI issues, headaches or migraines, and other of these inflammatory symptoms, and even symptoms associated with autoimmune issues. So as we know, inflammation can kind of rear its ugly head in a lot of different forms. So I like to say the other important thing or difference between MRT and these other tests, these IgG tests, is that when you get your results with an IgG test, you get like, okay, here's what you shouldn't eat. And so people go off and say, okay, I'm just not going to eat these foods. Well,
and
they don't tell you, right, because they don't tell you what you should eat.
Right, absolutely.
And so you end up just having this, okay, here's what I need to avoid, but what am I going to eat? So the nice thing about MRT when you get your test results is that we not only tell you, well, these yellow and red foods comes up on our testing form is green is kind of the go foods, yellow kind of watch out, and red, are high inflammatory foods. Those are the things we want to avoid, but these low green foods is actually what we want to eat. So we as dietitians can take these foods and create a dietary plan around what a person's not really reactive to, either low reactive.
Because sometimes get even with regular medical nutrition therapy, the doctor's like, oh, well, just don't eat this. And you're just like, well, what am I supposed to eat? And the MRT test is a little bit more deeper for these allergens that are bothering you. So it's good that we're actually able and have the education to be able to teach people what they can eat and looking at it in a different point of view.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I think is super important for people to know is you're going to eat the things that what I say your body likes. Okay, those are those low green foods first. Then you start adding foods that go up on the spectrum of the test results. So as there's more of a response, the green response arrow, so to speak, goes up. And so you start adding those foods in after you've eaten the low green foods. But we also tell people you don't want to eat things we don't test for. And they don't tell you that in these other programs, because if you don't know how you respond to, like, for example, what agave is not on our test panel. We can't test for everything. We test for 176 foods and chemicals, which is, to me,
that's huge. It's a large number.
Oh,
there's no way we can test all foods because, as we know, like supermarkets, they come up with an extra, like sometimes 10 to 15,000 different foods every year. So there's no way we can educate people on that, which is so wonderful about this test. You have a set group of foods, and then you can expand out. Just makes it
Absolutely
easier to do.
So, I mean, and part of the program, it's not like, well, you're never going to eat untested foods. But the first thing you want to do is eat the foods your body likes, calm the immune system, heal the gut. And then when you start feeling better, then you can start testing out the foods that we don't test for. And then even later on, you can test out the things you were reactive to. So that is the goal of the program, to heal the gut so that you can tolerate maybe some of these foods down the road.
And I think it's important to remember that once you get down the road, there might be some foods that you haven't been able to eat, but some of the foods that we deal with are dose dependent. So if there's a food that you couldn't eat at all, now you might be able to eat a smaller portion, be able to enjoy it, not have a reaction, and then not have it for a little bit and come back to it.
No, and the program is set up so that you can do some of this little bit of trial and error and kind of, maybe I'll try a little bit of this, take a break, and then try it again and really see. Because when you restrict your diet to a limited amount of foods, you have a better chance of knowing what is a problem and what isn't. So I think for people that, it's very valuable. I mean, even down after, years down the road, it's something that the information that you learn, you can use to kind of help you always manage your health.
Absolutely. So you've been doing this for a while. What do your patients say is the hardest part about following the protocol?
Well, one of the things that I found is that you need to focus on the foods that you're not reactive to, and that can be limited. And then you need to take these foods and, learn to be creative with meal and menu planning within the boundaries. And if you're not used to maybe using some herbs and spices, maybe I have a lot of clients who we're testing out whether gluten or wheat are a problem. And so maybe you've never even understood what gluten-free is or wheat-free and some of these alternative grains. That can be a challenging. If you're a bread person, that can be hard to omit, especially if you also like multi ingredient things, because we really try to teach people to eat plain and simple. Label reading's really important, and that can sometimes be difficult.
Yes, that's very key, because now you can find things that say gluten-free, and as dietitians we're like, well, that never had gluten in it anyway.
Right.
So
there's
it's
so many marketing tactics.
A lot of people, because they don't know, and that's why we're here to educate them. They don't know, and marketing takes advantage of that.
It absolutely does. And so I really try to help my clients be more creative. If you're somebody that doesn't cook very much, it can be a little more challenging, but there's so much convenience out there where you can steam vegetables in a bag, and you can, they have brown rice that you can, just pop in the microwave that's already cooked, and you can kind of put that together. And I try to really encourage people to think about eating as a little more plain and simple, because, like heavy sauces and, condiments and all this stuff can really drive these issues with these ingredients and causing the problems.
Absolutely. What is the most common issue that you've seen successful with the LEAP protocol?
Probably, again, I've been doing this for 18 years. Probably the most common issue that people come to me are gastrointestinal. They have gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, IBS, and they've gone to their doctor and they tell, and they put them on some things, and then they tell, a lot of times doctors say, it's stress or it's all in your head. And so they don't really listen to them. So often, as dietitians, we can be the last resort, because people are little apprehensive about messing with their diet because they're afraid that they're not going to be able to eat, what they like. But that seems to be the most frequent. Probably, kind of headache, migraine. Migraines can often be food related, not always, but often. Those are common. And I have a lot of clients that have autoimmune hypothyroidism, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, all have these different signs of inflammation. And those in particular, when they start working on this personalized anti-inflammatory diet, really feel better.
Yeah, it's life changing. It really is. You wouldn't think so, because sometimes you think, oh, I'm eating all the healthy foods and I'm still feeling bad. And for example, I was eating kale a lot. Kale is a healthy food. There was a time where it was the superfood, and as dietitians, we're like, oh, have kale, and it's a wonderful food if it works for you. But it didn't work for me. It was like one of the key um, inflammation causing foods in my body. So
Right.
it's
And
just
people are
interesting.
often, they don't understand. They think, well, you're right. How can strawberries or kale or spinach or butternut squash like
Mhm.
be unhealthy? Well, it's not that it's unhealthy. It's still a healthy food. It's just something your body doesn't like right now. And, when people have compromised gut function, I found, and they tend to eat the same thing over and over again, they can often create these sensitivities. And by basically you're telling yourself, hey, take a break from the kale, let's try some other things, and then let's revisit that. And often they can go back. Maybe they're not eating it as much as they were, but
Mhm.
some people tend to overdo it.
Right, because we get used to getting into the same pattern of what we're eating. So, I mean, for myself, it was just like I was daily feeding myself something that was just not good for my body, and I knew it as a healthy food, but it wasn't. So it's really key for us to know what those problem foods are and how to remove them, and then think about incorporating them later once you've got your inflammation under control.
Right. And you know what? There's so many food choices that, if you have to give up one for a while, I mean, like, okay, if you give up kale, you can substitute spinach or chard. There's lots of different greens that we test
Exactly.
for. Um, and so that, as your role as a dietitian is for our clients to understand that and then help them incorporate that into their diet so they don't feel overwhelmed. I think when clients come to me and they get their test results, they're mailed to them directly. So they get a chance to read through the information and process everything. They're often like, when we start talking, they're overwhelmed, but we
Yeah.
then help simplify things and then create those meal plans. I'm like, oh yeah, I can do this.
Mhm, mhm,
Very
absolutely.
gratifying.
Absolutely, I know, to help clarify and make things so simple for people. We take the science and then we kind of allow them to take bits and pieces of it so that they can utilize it for their menu planning and for their day-to-day lives. We just make it that much easier for them.
Absolutely.
Cool part about being a dietitian.
Yes, it is. It is a cool part.
um, so I have most of my patients have had uh, seen a significant change in 5 to 7 days. Myself, I saw a change in 5 days. What is the shortest time that you've seen a patient feel better, and what's, I guess, the longest time? Because I don't want people to think that, oh, it's a short period. It's 5 or 7 days and that's it. We do have some people that go on for a period of time before they're able to feel significant relief.
Good question. So I would say again, the clients that come to me with predominantly their issues are GI problems, they usually see their symptoms resolve the quickest. And I would say within the first week. I mean, yeah, sometimes it can be in the first few days, especially if there's something that they were eating frequently that turned out to be, and they'll look and they'll say, wow, I eat that all the time. And then, they take that out of their diet after a few days, they see a change. Um, Clients that have more complicated issues, meaning, okay, so they have some GI, but then they have a lot of other stuff going. Skin issues tend to take a little longer, maybe a month or so. Autoimmune, some of those clients can be a little more complicated. So the more symptoms you have, the more complex of a client you are, I think the longer it takes to get kind of that full effect. But it kind of starts with the GI, and then it because that's where the food goes in the gut, the intestines, etc. And so when you start cleaning that up, then ultimately, the mediators are dumped into the plasma and all that. And so you start seeing that symptom resolution.
So tell us, actually, if you have a couple, I would mind a couple, tell us what your biggest success stories are that you're just like, I can't even believe this person is like night and day, amazing. Tell us about a few of those, what their
So
diagnosis was.
I was thinking about that, when I was kind of like, thought process of doing this podcast. And so first I just have to say, because I've been doing this for so long, I've had so many success stories. I mean, like 90+% of my clients have improvement, even the ones that don't do the program the way that I recommend. Like some people, they'll start out gangbusters and then they kind of fall off, but they still have removed some of these reactive foods and they've done some things and they feel better. And so I try to continue to guide them along. Partly because they travel a lot, they eat out a lot, and it's just can be difficult in their lifestyle. But I would, and then I've worked with athletes that have done the MRT leap to kind of help with some of these, particularly GI symptoms when they're racing, and also their overall performance and whatever they're doing, and they've seen like big improvement. I mean, like for a lot of endurance athletes, bananas are really like a key food. And, I've had clients that came back reactive to bananas and they're like, well, no wonder. So that's been great. But in one individual I think about, so it was this young female came to me and she had really bad C. So she had really bad constipation. And she'd been dealing with it for a long time. And so when we sat down and talked and we looked at her results, simple sugar seemed to be a big problem for her in terms of the way the test results came out, and then also what she was eating, because you kind of ask, okay, well, so we cleaned that up. In a matter of a few days, it completely resolved itself, and wow. She was feeling great, and so we worked together and we continued. The other thing that she figured out when the time came, she could go back out to eat, like she went. And going out to eat, that's when her symptoms would come, because technically you don't really know how people are preparing something in a restaurant. I mean, you can do as much as you want with discussing this with the chef or who's ever preparing the food, but there's usually something in there you just don't know. And so she realized eating out's going to be a challenge, but at least I know that now. But so she kind of, she was really happy. She went on her merry way. And a few months later, she emailed me and she said, well, I'm converted for sure. She said, I slowly started to fall off the boat. I started eating sugar again in my old diet, and all her problems came back. So she says, I'm a believer and I know what I need to do now. So, we kind of had a little bit of a laugh, but I was just thrilled that, and there was a couple other things in there, but I do really remember that this, cane sugar is a big problem.
Awesome. You have a few more?
It's just like I have so many clients. I mean, I have clients that, figured out like that their body didn't like fermented foods very much, and so when they took wine and beer out, I mean, of course, alcohol is inflammatory, but they really, that really made a big difference in their lives. And, people who were having trouble holding weight because they kept losing all their food through, like IBS type responses, particular diarrhea. And so they had the response of weight gain, which they were thrilled about, or, weight loss, where, some of these inflammatory foods, which, weren't necessarily bad foods, but they were just, not something that their body liked, that also kind of let go of things, helped their metabolism. And, they were happy with that outcome. So, yeah. It's just a lot of what I remember is just all the different areas where people with rheumatoid arthritis and hypothyroidism, like getting gluten out for those people was huge. And the other big one, and I don't know if you see this, like dairy. I mean, dairy is kind of a complicated food. You can have an allergy, you can have an intolerance, or you can have a sensitivity. And some people have all of them, but, and they really shouldn't be eating dairy. And when you actually show it to them on their report with their name on it, and they see, okay, I should not be eating dairy, and they really watch it and take it out, they feel so much better.
Right. That's why I love the initial symptom survey, and then
yes,
2 weeks later, some people are like, oh, I'm not sure, I don't really feel better, but then you look at the numbers and you show them side by side, they're like, oh, I do feel good, I really do feel good, and
Right,
It's just
especially with individual symptom areas.
exactly, because they're just so used to saying that I don't feel good. Sometimes you once you start asking them the questions, going through the survey, they're like, oh, it has been a bit since I felt that way, or this doesn't bother me as much. And so it's just really nice to show them side by side that this is making a difference, because when you're in pain, or you're just not feeling well, you're missing out on life because you're grumpy. You make plans, you can't keep up with them, or you make plans and you always have to go to the bathroom, so you're just like, yeah, I'm not feeling it today. So we're actually changing people's lives because they don't have to worry about finding all the bathrooms. They don't have to worry about, is my head going to hurt later because I'm not eating the things that cause the inflammation in the first place. So it's just food, but it's not just food. It's something that we can change
Oh,
easier.
absolutely. And
Big
when
meds and things.
yes, mentally, when people see these symptoms resolve, their anxiety goes down, the signs of depression, all the, like, that's why I think it's so important to talk to people about that connection with food and your brain fog and fatigue and, lethargy and all that stuff that people experience. They think, they don't realize it's food related, and then they start feeling better, and then they're, the gut feels better, the brain feels better, and it's this, it can be a vicious cycle, and it can also be a part of the healing process. And that, I always like to do the symptom survey, obviously at the beginning of the program, and then talk about that in that third consult, so that you can I compare each area, I compare the total score. I mean, I remember somebody having like a score of like 90 or 100, which is pretty high, and then going down to 20.
High here is not a good. It's not a good thing. So I want to point that out for people.
And then it's like 18 or something, and they're like, I mean, and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe it, because they know they feel better, but they don't realize because that symptom survey is very specific on how much you experience these different things, and so it's such a helpful tool.
Now, suppose you had somebody who was hemming and hawing. They're like, do I do this? Is it one more thing? Like, I just can't handle doing one more thing. What would you tell that person to do? Like, how would you tell them that they should try the protocol? Like,
so the first thing I always like to say is this program is very personalized. Okay, so we're not just giving out general recommendations. This program is absolutely 100% for you. It's your test results. And also, I make sure that they understand I'm not going to have you eat foods that you don't like or you don't eat very much. I mean, we know if somebody has clams on their first couple of weeks and they don't eat clams or don't like them, well, no, we're not going to make you eat clams. So I think people are worried they're going to end up having to eat things they don't like. And I try to have them say, this is your program, you're empowered to run this program, and these are your test results, and so we're together going to create your meal planning, the foods you're going to consume, etc. And most people, when you start going through that meal planning process, and I say, okay, what do you typically eat for breakfast? Then they tell me, and then I said, okay, well, all we have to do is tweak this, this, and this. So they realize, well, it's not going to change that much. Now, for somebody who eats out a lot, eats a lot of processed foods, things on the go, they're more challenging. So but again, you have to take the approach is like, there's so many things today that are convenience foods that can be fine. So, and then, reminding them that maybe this is last resort, how bad they've been feeling, like you won't even believe how quickly you will respond if you follow the program the way it's set up. So if people know that there's this light at the end of the tunnel, I think it gives them more, ability to kind of want to move forward. Yeah, that's pretty much, I usually, if I talk to somebody on the phone and we can talk about those different things and kind of relay some of their fears, people are on board.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. And even people around you start noticing. Like, I didn't tell people that I was doing the protocol And I found people like, you're not like grimacing as much as possible, as much as you used to. You're like smiling more than you used to. So it's just little things like that just make you feel good, and it just translates into other parts of your life. So I just think that's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, it is a big commitment, and once you just kind of
Yes.
spend the money, the people like they want to see results. And the one thing I just caution on, which still to me is a positive, is sometimes there's something else going on that can be like maybe not as food related or not related at all. But if you can rule out
Mm,
food sensitivities, maybe you figure out, okay, this and this and this is a problem, and I've improved these symptoms, but I still have this going on. Well, then you've ruled out the food part. Now you can go to the next, and I try to help clients take that step further, whether it's, other testing. I might say, you might have a micronutrient deficiency. Maybe you need
mhm.
to kind of look at some specific nutrients that are related to these symptoms. And so that's what's really cool about that test. And
Yeah.
also, if somebody's going to end up being a little bit more, let's say you're not eating gluten and you're not eating dairy, and you're like, okay, what am I going to be missing in my diet if I'm, like avoiding these foods? What do I
Mhm.
need to do, maybe supplement wise? The micronutrient test helps to pinpoint some of that, and helps give people guidelines on, oh, okay, probably a good idea to take a B complex, or what's your vitamin D look like, those kinds of things. But
Mhm.
it also helps you just keep gaining trust with this client, so that you keep working with them.
Right, right, right. Definitely. Because you just never know. You just never know what you're going to find. There's so many fillers in different foods, and then sometimes we can help you find a different food that's similar that you enjoy just as much, but it doesn't have the problem item in the product. So there's
Right.
just so much to look at. So much to look
There
at.
is. And and we also I provide a lot of resources to my clients, and I mean, just kind of recently, and I was talking to Jan about this, my mentor, um,
Hmm.
AI, you can go into like a chat GBT and you can type in, here's the foods I can have, create like a menu plan for a day, and
Right,
it
right,
just
right.
spits it out. So so it's so much easier now than it used to be, where you had to use a little more thought process with that, and do a little more research. But
Right.
we have Pinterest links with guidance on certain kinds of foods to purchase, recipes, etc. And I mean, there's so many different ways to cook things now that are yummy and palatable, that it's just so much easier.
Absolutely, absolutely, it is. And I just want to bring up one last thing as far as um, reading labels are definitely key. But I think it's important that people realize that if they've been eating a food and it's been going well, that every once and again, when you're buying that same food, take a look at the food label. Just because companies are trying to find fillers and other things to put into products that make them less expensive, so you just want to make sure that you're not thinking that you're eating something that's so great for you, and they've actually changed a couple of ingredients, and they're the foods that aren't working so well with your body. And to reach out to a dietitian, and we'd help you find something else that's similar, but that's not going to make you sick again.
Absolutely. Like, one of the things I think about, like these gums and in non-dairy milks,
Mm,
and a lot of
yeah,
some people can't tolerate those things. And
absolutely,
so
absolutely.
uh, you know, I one of the things I really am emphatic about with my clients is anything that you put in your grocery basket or cart that has a label, even if you've bought it before, you always want to look at the label just to make sure, yes, they haven't changed the ingredients, they haven't added some kind of new filler. And
Absolutely.
9 times out of 10, if you find something and it has, things that, that we don't test for, you're reactive to, you can put that down and find an alternative.
Correct. Absolutely. Any last minute words of wisdom for somebody who's contemplating?
Well, I just again think, if you're somebody who's been suffering and have these inflammatory symptoms that you know pretty sure could be related to foods that you're eating,
Mhm.
um, this is the way to go. And it's not, you don't have to take any supplements or any kind of weird, you don't have to give yourself injection. You don't have to do anything. It's all just about food and clean eating. And
Mm-hmm.
also, dietitian you're working with can help you with getting the balance in. So you're making sure you're getting your nutrients in. You're not
Right.
overloading on protein, or maybe or too many carbs or whatever. So
Uh-huh.
it's taking this list that you have and really helping you create a plan that you can live with and live on.
Definitely. Definitely. Okay. It's so great listening to you and talking to you. Every time I talk to another LEAP therapist, I learn about other ways to more easily explain it to my patients. So I really appreciate that, and just the positive outcomes that you have. I love being able to share these things, which is why I started the podcast. So to Angela, I want to thank you so much for being on this episode,
You're
and
very welcome.
to the podcast listeners, I just want you to remember that there are a lot of disease states that are caused by inflammation, arthritis, brain fog, IBS, IBD, diabetes, fibromyalgia. We've talked about a few of those. The list goes on, and I want you to remember that we give you a test, but we don't just give you the test and let you go with it. We work with you so that you're able to live a fun, healthy, happy life. We review the results with you. And so I ask you, why not start with food? So
Why not
look
start with
on,
food?
yeah, why not start with food? So if you're interested, you can email me at healingbytheforkfulrd@gmail.com. If you're in Colorado, you can talk to Angela.
Yes.
And I will have her information with her email in the listing underneath the podcast so that you can find both of
Great.
us when you're ready. We're always ready to help you. Thanks
Yes,
again.
we're
Thanks so
always ready
much,
to help
Angela.
you. All right. Well,
Great.
thank you again for including me in your podcast, and everyone have a great evening or rest of your day.
Exactly. Thank you.